Welcome to the Tao of Pizza, where we feature top logistics leaders, entrepreneurs, and supply chain innovators and share their inspiring stories with a holistic twist.
Mark Hiddleson here, host of the Tao of Pizza podcast, where I talk with top industry innovators in the warehousing, logistics, and supply chain business with a holistic twist. Before I introduce today's guest, check out an episode I did with Michael McKitka. He's the Executive Vice President of Education at the Warehousing Education and Research Council. Had a great conversation with Michael a few weeks ago. You'd probably enjoy checking that out. Well, today I've got Dr. Jeremy Weiss here of Rise 25, who's done thousands of interviews with successful entrepreneurs and CEOs. And today we flipped the script and he's going to be interviewing me. Jeremy?
Mark, I'm excited about this because you are a man and master of action. And that's what this episode is about action. And we're going to get into it. Before we do, this episode is brought to you by Specialized Storage Solutions. And Mark, I know you've been in the logistics and storage industry for decades, okay? And, you provide industry-leading warehouse storage solutions nationwide. So if someone has a warehouse and that needs racks, shelving, carts, conveyors, mezzanines, anything, help with design, engineering, installations, inspections, everything, that comes into optimizing your logistic operations, call them, email them. And sometimes people don't even realize, Mark, that you actually help people with permit acquisition services, everything. So you take a holistic approach at the entire business supply chain ecosystem. So if you want to learn more, go to SpecialRackscom or give them a call, 707-732-3892. He even decided he would give his personal email address for podcast listeners. If you want to email him, it's markhiddleson@aol.com. Check it out and ask him any questions you have. So on this is going to be the integral action through the lens of the prostitute. And before you are like, what are you talking about here? Mark will go into the archetypes, what that means, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for joining us.
So talk about that integral action through the lens of the prostitute. What does that mean?
Yeah, I knew this is the one that when I saw on the list, this is the one that we could have some fun with. But unfortunately, I'm going to divert pretty quickly away from the obviously people think of a prostitute, they think of selling your body for money or sex, the sexual part. For me, it's the fun part, and that goes back to the integral worldview of the clown. So all of these episodes that we've done, and this is the fourth one, I've told the story through the lens of an archetype because it's a process of self-discovery, and the chapters are organized on purpose. Like the first one was a worldview, because the worldview is kind of what includes all the other things, because your worldview is basically what's possible, and told that story through the lens of the clown. And it's just the way, if there's 12 archetypes that I've identified with myself, and prostitute's one of the survival archetypes. We kind of all share it in common. So there's 4 of them. There's the victim, the saboteur, the prostitute, and then it's funny, then the child. So everybody has those. I mean, the other ones like the clown, not everybody's a clown. Not everybody sees the Don Juan archetype, but we talked about mission and vision through the lens of Don Juan, which Don Juan is like the seducer. And what makes it integral is that all of these archetypes and all of these things that we're talking about, whether it's action or a vision or a worldview, there's a shadow side. And so the prostitute is, it's just not the shadow side. And it's not just selling. It's not just what you're willing to do for money, but it's about a lot of the trade-offs that we make. And the prostitute is kind of, how much are you willing to sell of yourself, your morals, your integrity, your creativity, intellect, your word. And that's how the last chapter we talked about the integral speech through the archetype of the messenger. And the last part of that is the most important thing about speech is that one of the most important things is you are your word. And so action is kind of the second half of that. So the prostitute archetype comes into play when it comes time, when you've given your word, and then when it's time to fulfill on your word. Sometimes the mood is different when it comes time to fulfill that commitment. And so if you choose not to fulfill commitments, the prostitute archetype is coming into play there.
When you think about this integral actions through the lens of the prostitute, how do you translate that into business? How do you use this for your business life?
So in a lot of people are taken with the idea of getting what they want. Okay. And a lot of people aren't willing to swallow the pill of the work that's involved in getting there. And in business, I've had some pretty ambitious goals, and one of the things is a lot of the effort that goes into it is hidden behind the scenes, and it's I spend the majority of my time doing things that people don't see, and it's not in the spotlight, and it's not the fun stuff, but it's the work required to do some of this. And I mean, one of the first things I can think of in building a business, and I just had a conversation with somebody who founded a company, and they do apps and websites. It's Valerie Dawson, and she was talking to me about her process over a 4-year period of time. She's done something like, I forget what it was, 2,000 cold calls or 20,000, whatever it was. The number, I was just like, wow, cold calls, and most people cringe. Like, I don't even call it cold calls in my business. I call it warm contact introduction model. But the thing is, you got to ask yourself, if you're in love with an idea or something you want, it's kind of, what are you willing to put up with, or said another way, what are you willing to pay for, whether it's with your time, your energy, what are you willing to pay for everything that comes with it? And it means, whether writing a book, building a business, or, if your goal is to become rich and famous, something is going to get in your way or get on your nerves on that path. And so it doesn't always sound inspiring. It's like the whole podcast isn't about the bad news either, because I know we'll get into the shadow aspects of it. And you brought up, I'm a man of action. So it's the thing with integral action. One of the reasons that I call it integral is because it's a whole. And so the action has a shadow side. I mean, and I'll share some of my personal experiences. Yeah, I'm a man of action, and that's great. In business, it means, I'm willing to overcome fears and do certain things, but I can also, I can take it too far.
How so?
So the easiest examples, one of the things for building, and one of the reasons I'm doing archetypes and self-awareness and everything, the most important things for me, and whether it's business or personal, anything, it's relationships. And in business, it's really good to be a man of action. And another one of my archetypes is the hero archetype. So, like, if I had a choice, if I didn't put all these archetypes in a hat and then draw them out one by one and go, I'm going to do these chapters, I would have told every single one through either the hero or the athlete archetype. Like, those are two. And that can get in the way, the action. So at home, a lot of times I find myself saying things that I would be better off if I just didn't say anything. It's or solving problems. You find that not everybody. I have this proactive approach in business, and when you let that overflow into other areas, people go like, "Hey, look at this is a little too much action that I wasn't asking for." Rarely does it become a problem in business, because it's so busy that people are happy if you're taking action on their side. But I personally can get into this mode where it's problem solver mode, or it's looking and it's like, oh, this is what you need to do. You need to make a list of these 10 things and take action on them. What's happening is procrastination, but all you got to do for that is overcome fear. And it's just like, whoa, dude, I was just sharing what went on with my day. Right.
You also talk, Mark, about first things first, about practice.
So practice. So that's the thing. If you have So first, let me say a little bit more about the shadow. So shadow is also how much are you willing to sell of yourself, and it really has to do with how you spend your time. And so, for me, and this is, I'll talk more about the shadow at the end because I really want to talk about non-action and how that really, things when you do put in the practice, things become more effortless. But the silver lining of the prostitute archetype is really that when you confront this archetype, it transforms the prostitute into sort of like your guardian angel, because you're more aware of when you are selling, you're trading things. Like if you're this is something that I like to, when I meet somebody. Like, I have a really good client that he started his company 50 years ago, and it's Tom Davies from Visa Tui Winery, and he's just always willing to invest his time, spend it with me. And when I go there to the winery, a lot of times I like to say hi. And it's not just, and then whenever I go there, it's like, oh, we're meeting the president of the winery, or I know the president of the winery. And if I was doing that just to say, hey, I know the president of the winery, it's kind of the wrong use of that relationship. So there's a sincerity piece that, I really just want to say hi to Tom. And I almost kind of wish he wasn't the owner, just because, I love this guy. I just want to go say hi when he's there. And then every time I do, he ends up doing something really nice for us, but I'm not even asking for that either. But that's kind of how the prostitute, if you're aware of that, it doesn't become a problem. But if you're just, you could end up using people really. And that's kind of where the prostitute archetype becomes your guardian angel, because you're not doing those things because you realize it's a possibility. So, and the thing is about, uh, this is the one thing that whenever I think of the prostitute archetype, the first thing, and I've had bosses, I can't think of who it was, but one of the rules for the actual now, so I'm talking about prostitution metaphorically mostly, but for now, in prostitution, part of the uh, paradigms and principles for peak performance in prostitution is get the money first, right? Like, first things first. And there's a reason for that, because after the fact, it's always harder to collect once the services have been rendered, right? So you are laughing, but I wanted to use, because that's a good principle, because that brings in the principle of first things first. I've studied Stephen Covey. That's the third habit, which is really, we all have things in our life that are urgent. They're not always important. So there's this decision making matrix of, is it urgent and important? Is it important and urgent? And a lot of the stuff that's important, like practice, it's not urgent, you know. Um, and there's a lot of ways. It's funny, I do. And then in business, it's like, how does this relate to business? A lot of times when you're asking for the money, or at least me, when I'm asking for money, and a lot of times we're asking for a lot of money, I'm making sure that we've done every other thing that we need to for this client, that they're going to be more than happy to pay us. But there's jobs that we can't start without a deposit. And I find that every time I've violated that principle, and we started a job, it's like, oh, hey, I know you're a nice guy. I know you want to keep this project on the settle. So we just went ahead and ordered all this stuff. And we didn't get the deposit. We didn't get everything done ahead of time. It usually ends up costing in the long run. So the idea of practice, what's that?
It bites you later on.
It bites you later on, because it's harder to collect once the services have been rendered. So that's a great principle. But it also has to do with practice. So I think what keeps a lot of people from acting, and so another thing, the prostitute archetype is, it shows up if somebody's in an unhealthy relationship. And this has been in business too. I've had unhealthy relationships where I'm used to working with a certain supplier, a certain contractor, and you just get used to it. They're not fulfilling on the same level of commitment, but you just kind of deal with it. Well, when confronting this archetype becomes your guardian angel, you start to end some. They say, well, I'm going to wait till we finish this job, or I'm going to wait till next month, or I'm going to wait till I find somebody else. It's like the longer you stay in an unhealthy relationship, it's costing you. It's costing you somewhere else.
Yeah, I like, what you say, first things first, because, pain is a huge motivator. And once you resolve that pain, um, the people will have less motivation to pay you. I mean, you hope that happens, but like if I pull up into the mechanic, my car's not working, and it's like, I know, like I just had something go on with my car, and they called me before doing the work. They're like, hey, we have authorization, blah, 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 blah. And, for the as far as the payment goes, once it's fixed, I mean, they're also not going to give me my car until I pay it. But you know, you lose that motivation. It's like, we solved your problem. Okay, yeah, Mark, we'll get to paying you that, no worries. Whereas if they're trying to get their manufacturing facility up and running, then the motivation is there, right? You don't have to want to chase people after the fact.
Right. Yeah. It's for us it's usually it's a deposit. I mean, you're ordering custom material that, some of them has a lot of lead times, and we have to pay deposits for factory if we want to order material or have, things done, and
You don't want to be on the hook for it.
don't want to be on the
Yeah.
hook. Yeah. So
Talk about procrastination a little bit.
So procrastination is the enemy of action, right? And it's where you're gonna write that book someday, but you're waiting for the right time, or you're gonna start that new company, or you're gonna ask your boss for a raise, or you're gonna start making 20 cold calls a day every day. But it's always, or even losing weight, or any program that can always and I mean, it happens ever with me too. It's funny, the ones like I love to do once a year, I'll take a pretty intense 90-day period for what I call a 90-day transformation. It'll be a little bit physical. Uh, I talked a little bit about it with Nancy Fatine when I interviewed her, it's another great podcast to check out. She mentioned transformational leadership podcast, but those 90 days, sometimes I'll go, well, I don't want it to fall during Christmas, or I don't want to start. I'll start it in 2 weeks. And I've had times where I've done that where it was going to be a 90-day thing, and I didn't start it for 60 days. So it's the enemy of action. And one of my favorite, the first time I ever heard of one of the things I love to say is the secret for overcoming. So procrastination is based on fear, right? I'm afraid I'm going to miss out on something. If I start this 90-day transformation period, I'm not drinking, and I'm not doing anything, and I'm working out twice a day, I'm going to miss out on something. I'm going to miss out on the Christmas party. I'm going to miss out on Valentine's Day. I'm going to miss out. And then when you look at 90 days, you're going to hit something somewhere. So that's a fear of missing out. There's fear of rejection. A friend of mine, his daughter started a sales job, and a lot of it involves cold calling. And that's, I brought up the practice. When I was first starting out, I would practice and rehearse ahead of time, and I would visualize seeing people reacting positively. And I would do it, and I would say, this is just practice. This is just practice. I'm just working on my set. I'm working on my skills. And, if it is to be, is meant to be. But, thinking a lot of the law of attraction is something I read about when I was probably 18, 19 years old in the book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And he talks about, how your mindset, and you'll attract things. And the movie The Secret is really it's about the same thing. And I don't even know, do they bring up, have you seen The Secret, Jeremy?
It's been a while.
It's been a long time.
I don't remember if they bring in Think and Grow Rich into that.
I don't think they do. I don't think anybody does anymore. That's kind of a trippy book, The Think and Grow Rich. I read it a few years ago. Like I said, I read it when I was probably 18 or 19. And there's some deep stuff in there. Actually, he talks about one of his 13 tenets is the power of sex transmutation. So that goes right in to the prostitute thing. But it's, when you're practicing. So the other thing I told, so Augie said, do you have any advice? And it's funny, I'm always, I try to be careful. That's one of the things, action can get me trouble. A lot of times people don't want your advice. So that's a problem for me. It's like a lot of times people when coming to me advice, it's just a habit. So somebody asked me for advice, like, oh, cool. I've done a lot of cold calls. And but the secret is to put the action in the law of attraction. I mean, you just kind of got to get your butt out there. I think a lot of what I've seen, or the things will criticize about the secret of the law of attraction, is that you're manifesting. And I do believe in manifesting, but it has to start with the action. You have to actually be doing stuff, right? You have to take action.
You also, Mark, talk about training the lion.
So training the lion and taming the monster, this is there's a lot of different ways to say this. It was I was playing golf with a friend of mine. He's retired electrician. He has been for a while, and he loves to gamble. Gambler is that's another archetype. Well, one of these is going to be the gambler, because that's another one. And I chose a gambler archetype not because I love to gamble, but I like playing the odds and everything I do. I kind of like to know, when I'm putting action in. But he said, we were getting ready to leave, and everyone kind of you have a limit if you gamble, right? You don't, like, to me, I don't gamble. Like, I go, okay, I've got $200, and once that's gone, I'm not going to do it. So he gambles a lot, and he's retired, so he's on a fixed income. So he goes, but I've got a angel on one side that's saying, okay, you said 200, and 200 is the number. But there's a devil on this side, and he's going, but look at this machine's hot, and you're just getting into it. So that kind of reminds me of, everybody we have in this psyche, in the lion and the monster metaphor, I think is from, I always get mixed up between Plato and Socrates and Aristotle. I'm pretty sure it's a Plato thing. But there's these three parts of your psycho, and the man who's kind of deciding which one to listen to is kind of weak. Because the monster is like, it's the power of all the machines going off, and it's like, I want it now. I want to have this experience. And so one of the good examples of the lion, and I do this too, like a mastermind group, or when I do these 90-day transformations, a lot of times I'll have somebody else that I commit to. I'll commit to you. I'll say, Jeremy, for the next 90 days, or my friend Chris, or even get people who are going to do it. And team programs like that, they're more successful because that's the lion in you. And the lion can take over, pride and ego can take over. But that lion is kind of like, I gave my commitment to Jeremy. I'm not going to let that down. That's the pride part. So that can get carried away. And the monster is kind of like the shadow aspects of the archetypes. So to me, the practice, and I do this, through different ways, meditation, martial arts is another great way where you're training. You can't, the man's not going to defeat the monster. Like, you're just weak. Like, you want to eat the chocolate cake, or for me, a lot of times it's drinking. I'm a social drinker. I don't want to go to the parties and everything, and I'm going to be the guy. I actually downplay it too. If I'm on one of these things, I don't say anything about it. I don't say I'm doing the 90-day. I just quietly order a Diet Coke and stick a lime in it. And it looks like a cocktail, and just still going to be the life of the party. But that's kind of how it's a way of training your psyche, that, it's just one model. And Freud's was kind of the same, like id, super ego, and ego. And that the super ego is kind of like the man. The man is rational. The man knows that, you need to be in good shape. You need to eat the right foods. You need to avoid. I mean, I still, this is another one. I want to go through all the archetypes, but hedonist is another one of my archetypes, which is a pleasure, right? The more, the better. There's a limitation to that. And so for me, a lot of the things I do, I don't always look at it through the lens of the man and the lion and the monster, but I like that because, the monster is a shadow archetype. It could take off for me with, doesn't matter whether it's the hero or the athlete. So for me, like for athletics, I love to do, uh, what do you call it? Amateur athletics. So I was in a basketball league for 5 years, and I'd always say I loved it for the workout. I'm like, I'm just going to go out there for fun. I don't want to get hurt. I'm 50 years old. All these guys are in college, everything else. I just want to have some fun, exercise. It's not life or death. And the minute the whistle blows and it's a jump ball, everything's life or death. I'm playing all in. Somebody's going to get hurt, going to argue with the refs over every call. It's, have you ever had that experience, Jeremy?
I'm laughing because, I love basketball as well. And I typically play weekly, and, I think the older I've gotten, I have that mentality of, listen, I just want to have a good workout and not get hurt. Like that's a win, right? Earlier on, it wasn't that, but like you said, I'm taller, I'm 6'3", but I'm also thinner, and they've usually put me up against someone who's 6'5" and 250 pounds who outweighs my 70 pounds, and I am competitive. So I'm like, this guy's not pushing me around. That's not conducive to when I first went in. Like, I don't want to get hurt, but that's just when you go out there and you're competitive, it takes over sometimes. So I totally get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the monster. So the thing is, in the psyche, and Plato's point was kind of like, you don't want to kill the monster, because the monster is kind of where, like, that's where all the fun is. That's where that's the joy, right? And for the passion of life that I love. And I have it for basketball. I get into it the same, way with business. And like I said, the action, it's sort of an abstract theory, but for me, it's been really useful to kind of think of. And the things I train is just to kind of coordinate those three parts of myself, because there's a fallacy if you think because you know something, that you're gonna do it. Like, I know in personal relationships at home, like, I know that I need to keep my mouth shut probably 90% of the time, but in the execution, I always find myself saying, "Oh, you should do that," or, "Oh, look, all you got to do is this," or, "Hey, that was pretty easy." It's like, uh, I find myself getting into trouble, and so, I think the training, strength training, has been one of my. I found this quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's 74 now, I guess, or he might be 75 by the time this is out. But he was talking with Logan Paul, and he's like, "It's never going to change. Training is part of my life. It's that simple. Nothing's ever going to change till I die. I'll be working out. I'll be having a great time in the gym. I'll be getting the pump, and I want to feel good." And it's tough enough when you get old, so you got to hold on to as much as you can. And for me, like, strength training it is the pump. It is but there's a practice of getting a lot of this stuff. Um, when you're in business or you're taking on anything, there's a lot of stress. Your body creates a lot of stress hormones and hormones, and cortisol from stress. Is like, that's that fear you get if you're a zebra being chased by a lion. Your body's creating this chemical, and lifting weights is one of the best ways to use that up. And then it's like, relax, and you're practicing, and I got to think of a weightlifting thing for keeping my mouth shut. we can do that.
Maybe it's
It's
podcasting.
It could be, yeah. I mean, and this is a practice too. I mean, actually, it's a great point. All this, it kind of started. It's funny, 5 years ago when I watched my first podcast, it was with a lot of resistance, and now 5 years later, I'm hosting one. It's it's an interesting transformation. But
You know,
I think, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know one of the people that inspires you, that you think about and talk about, is Zig Ziglar as well. So I wanted to hear some of the principles that you take from him, but you can finish what you were saying before if you want.
Well, the Zig Ziglar, he was, I mean, he's an action guy, right? I mean, he would talk. I saw him live one time,
Mm.
and he had this chrome water pump thing, and he would be giving the end of his speech. I'm getting chills right now because you think of just the way. And his thing was, you're going to overcome fear with action, right? And things he used to say, like a dog in the middle of a hunt doesn't have time to scratch his fleece. if uh, and then Zig Ziglar, he also had a life wheel. His was important. Like your family's important, your faith is important, and yeah, money's important, but it's just part of a bigger pie. I mean, I love Zig Ziglar. There's a life wheel that I refer to, but there's the financial part, there's the emotional part, there's the contribution back to your community. What do you remember Zig Ziglar for? What sticks
I
out
used
in
to
your
listen
mind?
to Zig Ziglar's his books, audio cassette tapes in my car driving around, and from Zig Ziglar, I remember you can get everything in life, get everything you want, as long as you know what quote I'm talking about, as
Yeah,
long as you help people get what they want.
yeah, and there's a paradox. That's an important thing about action too, is that, and so action, of all the chapters we've done, the first three are really internal, right? Like your worldview is your own worldview to be aware of. Your mission and vision, it's kind of internal. It's what your mission is in your life, what you're going to use your life for, what's your purpose, how you're going to create meaning. And then speech, it starts to be external, because once you talk about speech, now you've kind of said something, so you've put it out there to the universe. But action is really where you're talking about. Action connects you to everybody else. And the Zig Ziglar thing about, the way I paraphrase is, you're going to be successful by helping other people become successful. And it's almost like a cliche, and it's so true. And it's really, that's a principle. I mean, that's one of the principles. It's almost like it's the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. But it's so powerful, but it's a paradox because once you know that, if you're and so then you're just helping people, but it's going to eventually help you. It's funny, everything I've ever done as like a social, like, I really wanted to coach that junior high basketball team because my daughter asked me to, right? And I'm like, oh, this is volunteering, this is giving back to the community. I've gotten so much more back from stuff like that. It's embarrassing sometimes. Another one is we sponsor Cycle for Sight, which is a local that's put on by the Rotary. Every year they raise like 100 and something thousand for it's not just the blind, it's also there's connected with Wounded Warrior. And so it's this fundraiser, bicycle fundraiser. Gary Rose, who's the president of the real estate or president of Rotary, he's our real estate agent, has been for 20 something years. I'm always excited to donate to that, but I get so much more back from it. It's just the connection, the networking, I'm not doing it for the recognition, and I'm not doing it
Yeah.
for like this or that. It's not a tit for tat. Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
one of the things
I
about
agree with
action.
you. And Mark, I like how you say it. It is a paradox. And because I'm thinking about this a lot too. And I think the distinction for me is that when you do that, you don't have an expectation of getting something back necessarily. You do it because you want to do it, because that it feels good to do it. You're trying to help, and you don't do it the expectation of, which is okay. I mean, even if you did, that's okay. But you don't do it the expectation of, hey, I'm doing this because I want the recognition or whatever it is. You just do it with, that's something you want to do, and you don't necessarily expect, but you will get a lot of value out of it. So I don't know. For me, it's that distinction of the expectation of getting something back from a charity or whatever it is. your expectation is just to give, or your goal is just to give, not expectation is to get something in return. I don't know how you think about that.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, after so many years, to me, it does come back to faith. I mean, that's one of the things, and tying it back to the prostitute archetype, is that you're less willing to sell your body or your soul or sell out if you have faith that you're enough. And then I think once I've seen that played out, because I've just been, I've been overwhelmed with gratitude for, the things I've done. And I always, for the first couple of years we did Cycle for Sight, it's like, wow, we're supporting this great cause. For the last 5 or 6 years we're done, it's like, wow, we're so lucky to be involved in this. Like, we're lucky to be involved. And it's kind of faith in just, and a practice, and some of it's become, a lot of it's become second nature to me. People say, oh, hey, you helped out to this thing. We try to just not. So one of the things about the prostitute too is that you can say no, and so that's kind of the shadow. Bringing in the shadow is, one of the things that helps you keep your word and be impeccable. Be impeccable with your word. Last time we talked about the integral speech of the messenger, and you brought up the 4 agreements, because one of them is be impeccable with your word. And so part of being impeccable with your word is fulfilling with action on your commitments. Well, part of being better at that is making less commitments to start with. And I love the 4 agreements because I can always think of 3 off the top of my head.
Me too.
And so that day,
can't remember the last one ever.
I thought of it was so it was be impeccable with your word, don't take things personally, do your best. And the one I couldn't think of, and what's funny, when I do this, I always I'll try to think of it, and then I'll finally give up. I'll go look at a copy of the book. Well, the 4th one, and so the one I can't think of, I'll always say, and this is just kind of a practice. Here's another example of a practice that I do. So the practice is, because the one I can't think of is probably the one that's biting in my ass that day. And the 4th one is don't make assumptions. So that day we were talking, and you kind of rattled all 4 off. I don't know if you had a cheat sheet or something. I say either Jeremy's really smart or he's got a cheat sheet. But even if you have a cheat sheet, you're still really smart because it's smart to have a cheat sheet. But I went and I go, don't make any assumptions. And so then I kind of did an audit, like, okay, where am I making assumptions? And I had some relationships, where I'm making assumptions, it's biting me in the ass. And your assumptions, those agreements are awesome. They sort of parallel, like your assumptions are kind of, it's almost like your worldview is, because you're assuming a bunch of things, and you're assuming stuff you don't even realize you're assuming, right? It's another awareness. And then not taking yourself too seriously is kind of like the clown. Don't take things personally. And so I love that when you brought it up. But those are some great examples.
Yeah, I love those too. And sometimes you're exactly right. I'll remember 3, and there's always one I'm leaving out, and I have to look it up. Maybe that day I happen to remember all of them, but usually I don't.
Well, you just rattled them off the top. That was awesome, because when you did it, you're like, yeah, what are they? They're be impeccable with your
Don't
word.
make any assumptions. Don't make assumptions. I do tend to. That's the one I usually am not remembering as well. So, but I like that. What you said is maybe it's probably the one biting me if I'm not remembering it. Mark, you also talk about, I've heard you talk about be the agent of chill, not change.
So that's kind of the so the shadow type, the shadow of the action archetype is just wanting to change everything, right? Like, you see an opportunity and you go out, you see somebody struggling, you just want to go in and fix the problem. And being an agent of change, there was a huge part of my life I was thinking, like, we need to change the way we're looking at the environment. We need to change the way the economy is structured. We need to change the way the education system is. We need to change. And as I gotten older, it's what I could see is that a lot of what the world would be a lot better if a lot of people, and especially people like me, want to change anything, were just blissing out. Like, because things a lot of things are going really, there's a story that I love. It's a Taoist story that, and I put it in the book, and I've written it and published it on the Tao Pizza website. But it's about a butcher that never has to. It's the prince and the sharpest knife, and this butcher, and he never, like most butchers would have to sharpen their knife, and it's a metaphor, right? It's not. I mean, I'm sure there was an actual butcher who was really good, but he never has to sharpen his knife because when he comes on a difficult cut, he slows down, and he knows that there's space in the ox because he's a skilled butcher, and he waits, and he practices the skill of first seeing the parts, first seeing the whole, and then seeing with energy. And so when I heard that, actually the first time I heard it, I thought, why is she even telling this story? I was thinking about it's the actual butcher with actual, and we did a practice called conscious embodiment, and it was really about, one of the things you can do when you train, and it's a huge part of martial arts, but it's lengthening the gap between your stimulus and the response. And I mean, sometimes I have a lot of knee jerk reactions. If something happens, it's just a knee jerk reaction. I'm going to react this way. So I try to look at those and minimalize it. It's increasing that, just like the butcher is waiting, and he just waits 1, 2, 3, and finds the space, and then flop, the meat falls to the ground effortlessly. And I think it's I try to practice that, and I try to do things. Meditation is kind of a centering practice, and it's not, meditation is one of those words. It's just been, when I say meditation, I really mean about 16 different things. Meditation is the word medi, which is kind of go to the center, the middle meditation. So it's like a centering practice. And contemplation is like a temple, which is like an outward going to the whole world practice. But the whole idea of being an agent of chill is kind of it's not so much go with the flow, but it's there's a principle of non-action. It's called Wu Wei, and it's really not forcing things or going with the flows of nature. It's almost like swimming with the stream instead of swimming upstream. And part of the practice is to kind of figure out which way the stream is going. And it's I'm humbled every time I think about what are the things that I'm hacking and chopping my way through life, instead of being like the butcher, the prince with the sharper knife, and waiting for the gaps, because the gap usually appears, if you wait for it. And that's kind of the things that I train myself. And a lot of times there's in a relationship, there's those uncomfortable silences. And that's the gap. I mean, those are the gaps between stimulus and response. And I think, that practice of I've practiced with people that you see it in their martial art. It's so beautiful. They're not even doing it. They just are that. And to me, if you can master anything, you could practice anything, you're investing time. There was this great quote that I heard. You spend like 30, 40, or 30 or 40 minutes a day to get ready. Just brush your teeth, your hair, comb your hair, everything like that. And how much time a day do you spend cultivating the gap between stimulus and response, or cultivating your energy? Like how many? And because I've always liked to spend about 20 minutes. I mean, it's less than what I spend watching TV, or less than what it takes to get ready. And that's kind of a great way of the prostitute is what are you practicing to harness that guardian angel that's going to help you see with energy, be in flow states, and eventually, I mean, there's so many things that are difficult in the beginning that once you learn it make it look easy. I mean, driving a stick shift in a car, snow skiing, surfing, anything that it takes or require to develop a skill, eventually it looks easy. And that's where I think the chill versus change is. It's not just like chill, like, oh, whoa, dude, peace out. We're just going to let things go to hell. But it's more like the prince, with the sharpest knife and letting the cuts kind of flop to the ground because you can see the gaps and the opportunities.
Mark, the last thing I want to ask you about in the integral action is, again, you talked about procrastination before, but kind of stronger about nuking the procrastination, and your thoughts on, just kind of take us home with that.
Nuke the procrastination nation in your head. Is that what you're talking about? I mean,
Yes, exactly.
So it's funny that so the first time that I heard, I was probably 11 or 12. And I remember that, and so the nuke, I love to use the nuke metaphor. Because I think we can nuke certain problems. It means it's just going to completely go away. But I remember finding out that like the Russians had enough bombs to blow up the earth 50 times. And I was really scared about that. And I thought it was something to be concerned about until I found out that the US had enough to blow up the world 100 times. It's like, oh, so we're safe. The good news is we have a combined effort to blow up the world 150 times. So that was a lot of relief. Doesn't that make you feel relieved, Jeremy? We've got twice as much as they did. So it's a good I think a good metaphor for you do a nuclear amount of action if whatever your goals are, and we know that everybody, including me, that we're capable. Like human potential is such a huge subject, right? Like everybody. Remember, so there's another thing. Like Einstein was. Most people only use 10% of their brain. Have you heard that? 10 or 50, or like somebody who's a genius uses 15% or 13% or 12, like the difference. So human potential is such a huge thing. So how do I make sure I'm on a trajectory that's moving me in the right direction? Untapped potential and tapping into altered states of consciousness until it becomes second nature. So that's something. So meditation, contemplation. One of the big things that's come in the last few years, and I don't know if it's just I think it is the use of psychedelics. And people are having LSD experience. And this started in the 60s with like Tim Leary. And I always forget what Ram Dass's name was before he became Ram Dass, but they were studying. There were some great studies on LSD. And Stanislaus Grof has done over 4,000 guided LSD experiences, and they've tracked them. So with science, one of the reasons they're using altered states of consciousness is people, and then it's another paradox because people have these LSD trips and they think that they saw the real reality, right? Like there's the waking reality, there's dreaming reality. And then you go, well, if you've had a few beers and you think someone's coming on to you, like that's not really reality. But if you take a lot of LSD, you can see actual reality. It seems kind of like, but what they've noticed is there's patterns, and that it's not just humans, there's other animals. There's the crows that flop down rooftops because they want to induce a state of altered consciousness. But these LSD, I think it's providing kind of a framework, and it's starting to become more mainstream. It's still not legal, but they're using MDMA to treat PTSD. And there's a lot of convincing studies. But I think, in meditation and a lot of these practices, it gives you access to some of those same altered states. And Stan Groff, his legacy training, called the Groff legacy training. It's holotropic breath work. So it's using your breath and you can train yourself until it becomes second nature. And that's one of the things that when you train yourself, you can overcome some of those knee-jerk reactions. Like I have certain things I used to just react if my kids would say it. And it's kind of sad too, because I have 3 kids. The oldest is awesome. He's Cody. He works for us. My daughter, I've mentioned before, she's 22. She's a senior at Oregon State. And my youngest just turned 18. And by the time I got to my youngest, it changed quite a bit. And it's not fair to the oldest because he got like Mark 1.0 and then Drake got Mark 3.0, but I don't react in a lot of the same ways. And it's just because of practice. And it's funny because my older son, all the stuff that we were kind of struggle about when he was younger, now that he's an adult, he does things for me without being asking because he just knows it's that important to me. And then my youngest is kind of coming along in a different way. And it's just an interesting transformation. But
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay,
I love tapping into.
Go ahead.
You can learn more about tapping into those altered states of consciousness at the DaoPizza.com. I've shared some of the practices that I do, and actually some of the people. Like I wanted to mention Vicky Del Joyo. She does the joy practice of joy qigong. I've trained a lot with her. Her website is great, and she has some free stuff. She offers classes. A lot of it's online now, but people can really, you learn a practice like that, it permeates into the whole rest of your life. Yeah.
Mark, I was going to say people should check out more episodes of the podcast. They can check out SpecialRackscom and much more. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I mean, all these conversations are always awesome. I know we're going to do this again. I can't wait. It's always good to hang out with you.
Thanks for listening to the Tao of Pizza podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.